This year, I hit the jackpot, $20 million from the lottery. The timing couldn't have been more perfect, as my 66th birthday was just around the corner, a week away to be exact. I had an incredible plan in mind to share this life-changing surprise with my children when they arrived to celebrate. After taxes, I'd take the remaining winnings and buy a luxury home for each of them, my son Logan and my daughter Luna. As if that wasn't enough, I'd write each of them a check for $1 million. It was a gesture of love and excitement, something I had been dreaming of. But when my birthday finally arrived, I found myself sitting at the dining table, surrounded by a spread of carefully prepared dishes, eagerly awaiting my children's arrival. I waited and waited, but by 10 p.m., neither Logan nor Luna had shown up. I called both of them several times, but the calls went unanswered. A wave of unease washed over me. Earlier in the day, around 3 or 4 p.m., Luna had called to explain that she had to stay late at work and might be home later than expected. Shortly after, Logan had texted me, saying there was a problem with the project he was managing and he would be delayed as well. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Work always came first. But now it was already 10 o'clock, and a half hour ago, I'd sent a message in our family WhatsApp group asking when they would be arriving. It was still marked as unread. With a heavy heart, I pushed back my chair and moved to the couch. On the coffee table, there lay 2 real estate contracts and 2 checks. One for each of them, a luxury home and $1 million in cash. My surprise, the gift I had been waiting all day to give. Recently, some of my yoga friends had gotten into lottery fever, urging me to try my luck. I played along, never in a million years expecting to actually win. But when I saw the winning numbers, I was so overwhelmed, I couldn't sleep that entire night. I hadn't told anyone. After all, they say wealth shouldn't be flaunted. I opted for the lump sum payout, even though it meant losing 40% to taxes. But after taxes, I still had over $10 million. My plan was simple. Set aside $3 million for my retirement and divide the rest equally between Luna and Logan. Somewhere between thinking and waiting, sleep crept up on me, and I dozed off on the couch. I didn't know how long I had been asleep when my phone suddenly rang. It was Luna. I answered, but before I could speak, she rushed in with an apologetic tone. "Mom, I'm so sorry. Work was crazy today, and I just couldn't step away. It's too late now, so I'll head back to my apartment. You should go to bed early." She barely gave me a chance to reply before the call ended. I looked at the screen. It was 11:47 p.m. Luna's office was far from home, so after her internship, I had rented her an apartment close to her office to make her commute easier. I stared at the dark screen for a long moment. Another 10 minutes passed, and Logan still hadn't reached out. He was probably caught up with work too. With a sigh, I stretched my aching back and slowly got up. I wrapped each untouched dish on the table with plastic wrap and carefully placed them in the fridge. The real estate contracts and checks? I tucked them away in my bedside drawer. By the time everything was put away and I was ready for bed, it was nearly 1 a.m. Just like that, the birthday I had been so eager to celebrate was over. The next morning, I woke up to a silent phone. No birthday messages from Logan or Luna. I sent a message in our family group chat. "It's Saturday. Come home for dinner. I have a surprise for you." But still, no one replied. After breakfast, I went for a walk, hoping for some fresh air and maybe a bit of clarity. As I was walking, I ran into my neighbor Mary, who was out with her dog. She smiled at me and asked, "You're usually out bright and early. What took you so long today?" The day was still young, but the birthday I had hoped to share with my children felt more distant than ever. I forced a smile, feeling awkward and embarrassed about the fact that I had spent the entire night waiting for my children to show up. Mary, noticing my discomfort, let out a light chuckle. "Let me guess," she said. "You spent all day yesterday cooking and wore yourself out, didn't you?" I didn't answer right away, so she continued, "I told you ages ago. Just book a nice dinner at a hotel. Less stress, less hassle." But no, you insisted on Logan liking spicy food, Luna liking sweet and sour, and your granddaughter needing a healthy kids meal. Do you really think a fancy restaurant can't handle that? Her words hit me harder than I expected. For the first time, I truly paused to consider it. Had I really gone through all this trouble just for them? My entire life had been centered around my children. Before my divorce, I had poured everything into their needs. And after my divorce, those years hadn't really been much different. But the question lingered. Had I ever, even once, put myself first? Before I could dwell on it any longer, a sharp, mocking voice cut through the morning air. "Oh, Mary, don't act like she's some poor self-sacrificing mother," the voice sneered. "She just loves to show off, always bragging about how devoted Logan and Luna are." What a joke. I turned to face the voice. It was Sammy, an old neighbor I had never really gotten along with. We used to work at the same fashion export company before I retired early, competing for the European market manager position. I got the promotion thanks to my fluency in French and my experience. Sammy, however, never accepted that she didn't win the role, believing I only got it because of my language skills, not my abilities. Since then, things between us had been tense. Now, standing in front of me, she took me in with a look of disdain. Her lips curled in judgment. "Not even a single decent piece of jewelry on you," she remarked. "I wonder how you've been treating yourself all these years." I had no interest in engaging with her, so I turned back to Mary and said, "I'm heading outside the neighborhood for a bit. You two chat." I started walking away, but Sammy stepped in front of me, blocking my path. "I waited here all morning just to do you a favor." "Don't be ungrateful," she said, crossing her arms and giving me a smug smile. "Last night was my grandson's birthday. We had dinner at a restaurant, and guess what? I saw the most ridiculous show." I exhaled sharply, already done with this conversation. "Thanks for your concern, but I'm not interested. Can I leave now?" Sammy's face darkened with irritation, and she pulled out her phone, scrolling through her album. Without warning, she shoved the screen in my hand. "I don't need to explain anything," she said with a smirk. "Just watch." Instinctively, I tried to pull the phone back, but the moment my eyes landed on the screen, I froze. It was a video of a woman in a red dress, her hair elegantly pinned up. She was smiling warmly as she greeted guests. I recognized her immediately. Chloe, my ex-husband Jeff Smith's mistress. And standing next to her, linking arms with her affectionately, was Jeff himself. They were laughing together, looking radiant as ever. The camera shifted briefly, then settled on two men standing by the stage, Logan and his biological father, Jeff. Behind them were two large banners, proudly displaying messages: "Happy 25th wedding anniversary, Jeff and Chloe," and "Happy birthday, Chloe." Then, my granddaughter appeared on the screen. I watched in disbelief as her small hands clutched Chloe's, her voice sweet as she chirped, "Grandma Chloe, you're so pretty, way prettier and nicer than my other grandma." She tilted her head up, her eyes filled with innocent joy. "I want you to be my real grandma. Next week is our preschool sports day. Can you and Grandpa come watch me?" The words echoed in my mind like a deafening silence. My heart dropped as the video ended. Sammy wasn't finished, though. "You should have seen Logan," she sneered. "He bought that old witch's solid gold bracelet. Must have cost close to 10 grand. I overheard his wife bragging about it in the restroom." She scoffed. "Oh, and he got Jeff a whole crate of Hennessy brandy. Not cheap." She clicked her tongue, shaking her head. "Funny, isn't it? Every time he visits you, he can't even be bothered to bring a 6-pack of beer. And Luna? Don't even get me started. She got Chloe an entire gold jewelry set, necklace, earrings, rings, the whole deal. She kept calling her mom like it was the most natural thing in the world." Sammy turned to me, a sickly sweet smile curling on her lips. "Didn't you always brag about how devoted they are to you? Strange, isn't it?" My mind raced, but I couldn't find the words to respond. The pain of betrayal was too much to bear. Mary grabbed Sammy's arm, trying to stop her, but Sammy yanked it away with a sharp, defiant motion. "No," she snapped. "She needs to hear this. She needs to see the kind of ungrateful, backstabbing wolves she raised." Her words were like a cold slap to the face. Always scrimping and saving for them, even sold her big house to help out H. What a joke. She did all that just to fool herself into thinking they actually care. The words struck me like a sledgehammer. I felt as though I was drowning. Without a word, I handed the phone back to Sammy, my legs shaky as I turned toward home, staggering forward in a daze. A bitter, metallic taste filled my mouth as I realized I had bitten my lip so hard it was starting to bleed. I collapsed onto the couch the moment I stepped inside, tears that had been held back for so long finally breaking free. I covered my face, as if I could somehow contain the flood of anguish threatening to drown me. But no matter how tightly I pressed my hands against my eyes, the past clawed its way to the surface, relentless and cruel. Memory surged forward like a runaway carousel, peeling back old wounds I had spent years pretending didn't exist. My marriage to Jeff Smith had been a disaster. So much so that by the time I turned 40, I had completely given up on the idea of love altogether. I divorced him and never remarried. Jeff was 6 years older than me, and we met through a mutual friend. Back then, he was a tall, clean-cut man with an air of stability. He worked as an analyst in the city government's research office with a bright future ahead of him. At 24, I was just a proofreader at a publishing house and not even a full-time employee. My parents saw him as an ideal match, respectable, well-employed, someone who could even lend a hand to my older brother's career. They told me I was lucky to marry him. So without truly knowing much about his past, I agreed. I only learned the truth later, and by then, it was too late. Jeff had never married before me because he had once been deeply and irrevocably in love. A love so profound that it left him unable to move on, unable to fully invest in any relationship that followed. Marrying me had simply been convenient. By the time I understood this, there was no undoing it. A year after we met, we were already married. We weren't overly affectionate, but we coexisted peacefully. There was respect, even if there was little passion. I convinced myself it was enough. Not every marriage needed to be a whirlwind romance. Stability was good. Predictability meant safety. In the third spring of our marriage, I gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. Thrown headfirst into motherhood, I was overwhelmed. 2 crying infants, sleepless nights, a body still healing from childbirth. I felt like I was drowning and wanted to go back to work. I asked Jeff if his mother, Laura, could come help for a while, but every time I brought it up, he made excuses. His father was sick. His mother was too busy. She simply couldn't spare the time. Days turned to weeks, and weeks turned to months. By the end of the year, Laura still hadn't come. My publishing house couldn't wait forever. When I failed to return, they gave my position to someone else. I was heartbroken but helpless. Then came the twins' first birthday party. Laura didn't show up. That was when resentment first took root in my heart. She was their grandmother, yet in an entire year, she had barely visited them. Jeff must have noticed my mood, because that night he finally gave me an explanation. His mother, he said, had suffered a bad fall while cleaning the house. She had injured her lower back and had been recovering in bed all this time. She hadn't told us because she didn't want to worry us. Guilt hit me like a wave. I had been angry at her, suspecting her of indifference, while all along, she had been injured. After the party, Jeff's aunt came over to see the children. I pulled her aside, concern tightening my chest. "How bad is Laura's injury?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I asked, "Does she need better medical care? Maybe she should come to a hospital in San Francisco." As I spoke, I reached into my purse and took out $1,000. "Can you give this to her when you go back, just in case she needs anything?" Jeff's aunt hesitated, a strange expression crossing her face, a mix of amusement and pity. For a long moment, she didn't say anything, then finally let out a small, mirthless chuckle. "Laura doesn't have a back injury." I stared at her, completely confused. She sighed, giving me a look I couldn't quite decipher. "I wasn't going to say anything, but every time I visit, I see you struggling to raise those babies alone, and it just doesn't sit right with me." She glanced around, then leaned in. "The truth is, Jeff arranged for his mother to be a full-time nanny for someone else." I blinked, unable to believe what I was hearing. "What?" "She's been working as a free babysitter." Jeff's aunt lowered her voice, speaking quietly. "For who?" My stomach twisted. "Maybe Jeff's boss," she said flatly. "The guy travels a lot, and his wife needed help with their kids. Jeff sent his mother to take care of them. I felt something sharp and cold lodge in my throat, the words barely escaping my lips as I whispered. So she can take care of his boss's children, but not her own grandchildren? The aunt nodded, and a suffocating weight settled in my chest. She sighed again and murmured, I shouldn't be telling you this, but keep an eye on Jeff. Make sure no one steals him away. Her words sent a shiver down my spine. Then, without another word, she patted my arm, turned, and walked away. I stood there, frozen, watching her retreating figure, unable to breathe. Her words were like a thorn lodged deep into my skin. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. The sting of betrayal gnawed at me, and my mind raced with unanswered questions. What had I married into? What was I missing? The truth, it seemed, was darker than I could have ever imagined. The next morning, after Jeff left for work, I stepped into his study. I rarely entered this room, only doing so when cleaning, and even then, I never touched his personal belongings. I had always believed that even in marriage, there should be personal space. But now, something told me I needed to know more. The study was simply furnished, 2 walls lined with bookshelves, a desk, and a chair. I sat down and pulled open his desk drawer. Inside, there were a few letters, his office's metal badge, an address book, and some unimportant documents. At the very bottom of the drawer, I found a black and white photograph. I carefully pulled it out, and as I looked at the image, my heart skipped a beat. It showed 5 people. Jeff stood next to a young woman wearing a white floral blouse with ruffled sleeves, her long hair braided into 2 plaits. I didn't need anyone to tell me the unspoken connection between them. It was unmistakable. A woman's intuition, perhaps. I flipped the photo over, and in the bottom right corner, in delicate, elegant handwriting, it read, Are bound by heart, love buried deep. April 19th, 1969. The writing was soft and graceful, likely hers. 1969, that was Jeff's final year of college. My gaze swept across the study, finally landing on a locked cabinet at the bottom of the bookshelf. Minutes later, I found the key hidden in the spine of how the steel was tempered. That night, after putting the twins to bed, I forced myself to sit down and read through dozens of letters. That was barely a third of them. The woman who had written to Jeff was named Chloe. Through her words, I pieced together a love story that had lasted over a decade. They came from the same small town and had left home for the same university, an unfamiliar city far from family and friends. They leaned on each other, encouraged each other, and eventually fell in love. Their relationship grew, flourishing in quiet, unspoken moments until they were inseparable. But before Chloe left for college, her family had already arranged a fiancé for her. She had agreed to the engagement. Every month, letters arrived from her betrothed, and sometimes he even sent her money for her studies. So their love had to remain in the shadows. By the time they graduated, most students returned home to find work, but Chloe's fiancé's family had wealth and connections. They secured her a job teaching French at a prestigious private school. Meanwhile, Jeff, after 2 years of applications, had finally been admitted to a prestigious university up north for graduate school. One married and the other left. The letters never stopped. When I was newly pregnant with the twins, Chloe wrote to Jeff, complaining about the exhausting task of balancing work and childcare. Her husband, always away on business trips, barely acknowledged her existence. She was overworked, overwhelmed, and constantly sore from carrying the burden alone. Hearing about it was painful enough, but when Jeff, feeling sorry for her, sent his mother, Laura, to help raise Chloe's daughter, that revelation shattered me. But it was the next set of letters. Those were the ones that gutted me completely. Every time Laura takes care of me, Chloe wrote, I feel both guilty and happy. I want to call her mom, but I don't know in what capacity. I feel terrible for your wife. You barely make $1,500 a month, yet you still secretly send me $500. If she ever found out, she'd throw a fit. You said your wife had twins. Well, the only thing I've ever seen give birth to 2 at once is my dog. I can't even imagine how big she must have been. Just the thought is horrifying. My coworkers joke about how I always get so many letters. I tell them they're from my husband. My love. They think I'm talking about Bruce, the man I married. The inked words were full of forbidden intimacy, a humid, suffocating closeness that made me physically ill. That evening, when Jeff came home, I couldn't hold it together any longer. I threw the letters in his face, screaming. The fight that followed was nothing short of a war zone. I had just given birth, physically and emotionally exhausted, and now I was unraveling completely. And him? He just stood there, his face impassive, watching my breakdown with chilling detachment, as if I were a stranger. Only when I had exhausted my voice, trembling from rage, did he finally sigh in irritation. "Are you done?" he asked, his tone bored. "There's nothing between us, just letters. If it bothers you so much, I'll stop writing them." His words made my fingers go numb. They made my legs weak. But I didn't even have the luxury of breaking down. The twins, hearing the shouting, had woken up and were now wailing from their room. Jeff locked himself in his study, ignoring everything. I wiped my swollen eyes and forced myself to my feet. The babies were hungry. They needed their nighttime bottle or they wouldn't stop crying. But when I went to the kitchen, the can of formula was empty. A crushing wave of despair hit me. I had reminded Jeff for days that we were running low on formula. I had asked him, begged him, to pick some up on his way home, even that morning before he left for work. But he had forgotten. Now it was too late. Something inside me snapped. I stormed to his study and kicked the locked door open with all my strength. The sight inside made my vision blur with rage. Jeff was sitting at his desk, gently tracing his fingers over Chloe's face in a photograph, his eyes filled with deep affection and longing. He froze when he saw me. I stormed over, snatched the photo from his hands, and tore it to pieces. Then I flung the scraps at his feet. "Jeff Smith, you are a lying, heartless bastard." I screamed. I want a divorce. For the first time, he froze. When he finally snapped out of it, panic overtook him. He scrambled to gather the torn pieces of Chloe's face, carefully tucking them into his pocket as if they were the most precious things in the world. Then, with fury boiling in his eyes, he turned on me. "You insane, hysterical, irrational shrew," he bellowed. He tried to storm past me, but I grabbed his sleeve, refusing to let him go. His eyes burned with rage. With both hands, he shoved me hard. I wasn't prepared for it. The force sent me flying backward, my lower back slamming against the sharp corner of the desk. A searing pain shot through me, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. My vision went completely white. Through the haze, I saw Jeff hesitate just for a second. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out the door, slamming it behind him. The house fell into a heavy silence, except for the heartbreaking cries of my children, echoing through the night. I don't remember how I made it through that night. All I can recall is the chaos, the agony, and the relentless cries of my children. Their tiny voices pierced my eardrums like needles, amplifying the pain in every part of my body. The next day, I wrote a letter to Jeff's workplace, the city hall, reporting his inappropriate relationships. But it felt as if I had tossed a pebble into the ocean. There was no response. When I ran into Jeff's supervisor, the man had the audacity to chastise me, implying that I was being unreasonable. He told me I was embarrassing my husband by airing our private matters in public. "Whatever disagreements you have, handle them at home," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Don't drag your husband's workplace into it." I sought help from the local women's support group. But back then, people weren't as willing to intervene in a marriage unless there was undeniable immediate danger. Jeff's affair, after all, was just letters, not actual cheating. My children were still so young, and the advice I received was always the same. Be patient. Endure. Look at the bigger picture. I felt like a caged animal, desperately searching for an escape, but every door I tried was locked. My parents and brother were dead set against me divorcing. "Every woman goes through this," they said. "Just endure it. It'll pass once the kids are older. Your life will be easier." They told me that Jeff worked hard enough as it was and that I didn't even have a job, so I shouldn't make trouble for him. He didn't even bring that woman home. So what exactly are you complaining about? Every time I mentioned divorce, Jeff ignored me. Eventually, he simply moved out into a dorm near City Hall, coming home only once every 10 days or so. The children were too young to understand. They sucked on their tiny fingers, babbling their first words, oblivious to the growing rift between their parents. For their sake, I swallowed my pride, again and again, like so many women trapped in broken marriages. I had become weak the moment I became a mother. And I had two weaknesses, my children and my inability to leave a marriage that was suffocating me. 7 years of degradation, exhaustion, and slow, quiet suffering until the final straw. Jeff had secretly sent Chloe another $1,000 to buy herself the latest fully automated washing machine, but the letter had been returned to sender. Chloe had transferred to a new school, and the post office had sent it back. I read his words, and for the first time, I felt something inside me snap. We didn't even have a semi-automatic washing machine. In the dead of winter, I was still scrubbing my children's dirty clothes by hand, my fingers raw from the cold. That night, I confronted him. We fought for the first time. He lost control. Furniture was overturned, a vase hurled at my head, shattering just inches behind me. I didn't hesitate. I called the police, then reached out to a local news station, asking them to report on how I had nearly been disfigured by my violent husband. The scandal erupted, spreading like wildfire. It reached not just City Hall, but the state government as well. Jeff's upcoming promotion, his transfer to a higher state-level position, was immediately revoked. As younger, more educated officials entered City Hall, his career stagnated. He was demoted and spent years stuck as an administrative assistant, filing paperwork in the archives. Only then, after losing everything, did he finally sit down and agree to a divorce. It took 2 months of relentless fighting. Jeff refused to let go of Logan. "If you want a divorce," he said, "I keep our son." I agreed. When it came to money, I was ruthless. I threatened to expose his affair with Chloe to ruin her reputation. In the end, I forced him to return every cent he had spent on her. I had no way of knowing the full amount, but I threw out a number, $50,000. By then, his salary had risen to just over $2,000 a month. 50 grand wasn't an impossible sum, but it wasn't pocket change either. Jeff, of course, didn't want Chloe to suffer, but he also couldn't stomach the humiliation of borrowing money from friends. So he mortgaged his parents' house and took out a loan for $50,000 that I'll never forget the look on his face when he handed me that check. The contempt in his eyes was enough to kill. If looks could truly kill, I would have died 1,000 times over. The house we had lived in belonged to Jeff before we got married. I left it behind, but I took everything inside. Even the old stew pot that had been patched up twice. I sold every single item at the flea market, walking away with only Luna in my arms. Logan went to live with Jeff's parents from that day on. The only connection Jeff and I had after that was the occasional exchange of our children. When my father found out I had gone through with the divorce, he was furious. I had defied him. From that moment, he never came to see me again. My mother, however, sneaked visits behind my father's back. But she never offered support, only endless sighs and tearful laments. She never once asked me what I planned to do next, or how I would survive. I was disappointed, but I no longer begged for love that would never come. The road ahead was uncertain, difficult, and unforgiving, but at least I had cut myself free from that disgusting, rotting marriage. At least I was no longer the discarded wife in someone else's love story, pathetically struggling to hold on. After the divorce, I used the money I had secured to buy a modest 650 square foot apartment. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I bought a few pieces of furniture, transferred Luna to a new school, and once everything was settled, I focused on something I had been anticipating: payback. I wrote a commendation letter to Bruce, Chloe's husband. I praised his wife's unwavering kindness, her years of tender care and devotion to Jeff. Bruce wasted no time. He filed for divorce immediately. Standing before the judge in tears, he declared that his wife had been having a long-term extramarital affair. Unlike what I had experienced, no one told him to endure. No one dismissed it as just a few letters. Instead, everyone condemned Chloe, calling her shameless, immoral, and a disgrace. Their divorce was finalized in record time. At the same time, Chloe was fired from her teaching job, accused of accepting bribes from students' parents. Whether she actually did or not, only Bruce would know. I didn't bother following their lives after that. I was too busy building my own. I found a job as a merchandise coordinator at an apparel export company. I had to learn French, master international trade, and juggle raising Luna. There was no time for petty gossip about people I had long since left behind. 5 years later, I was promoted to head of European sales operations. Meanwhile, Jeff had remained stagnant, stuck in the same position at City Hall with no career prospects. With no career left to worry about and no reputation left to protect, he finally married Chloe. He even took out a loan to throw her a lavish wedding. But the person who suffered the most from their union was Logan. Anytime Logan and Chloe had a conflict, Jeff always sided with Chloe. I will never forget that night, Christmas Eve, years ago, when Logan showed up at my doorstep. His clothes were tattered, his backpack filthy, his little hands frozen. The moment he saw me, he threw himself into my arms, sobbing. "Mom, I never want to go back to that house again. I hate them." Through his gasping sobs, I finally got the full story. With Christmas approaching, Chloe had made roast beef ribs for dinner. Unable to resist the aroma, Logan snuck a piece. Chloe caught him and slapped him across the face. When Jeff came home and heard what had happened, he didn't reprimand Chloe. Instead, he scolded Logan, telling him it was wrong to steal food. Chloe, emboldened, smugly ordered Logan to stand outside in the cold to reflect. It was freezing outside, and Logan, humiliated and furious, ran to his room, grabbed his backpack, and ran straight to me. "Mom, can I stay with you? Can I never go back?" Looking at his pale, chapped lips and tear-streaked face, I pulled him into my arms and held him tight. From that moment on, he refused to return to his father's house. Chloe, of course, was thrilled that I don't know what she told Jeff, but the man who once fought tooth and nail to keep his son suddenly stopped resisting. Instead, he sent over all of Logan's belongings as if discarding an unwanted item. For the first 2 years, Jeff still sent child support checks. Then, one day, they just stopped coming. That was it. I raised both my children alone. I taught them right from wrong, put them through school, saved money to buy them cars, even homes. And yet, they betrayed me, just like their father had. It felt as though I had cried my last tear that night. Outside, the darkness slowly swallowed the last traces of daylight. I forced myself to stand, my legs shaky as I made my way to the bedroom. Lying in bed, I felt like a fish gasping for air, desperately searching for oxygen. Then, the sound of keys turning in the lock echoed through the quiet house. Luna's voice followed, "Mom, we're back." I didn't move. I didn't answer. Logan's confused voice came next. "Mom's not home? Didn't she tell us to come for dinner this morning? Why hasn't she even cooked?" Luna let out a sigh. Who knows? She's been getting more and more annoying these past 2 years. So sentimental all the time. Every time I'm around her, I feel suffocated. It's so much easier being with Chloe. "Keep your voice down," Luna whispered. "If Mom hears you, she'll be upset." So what if she is? Are we really supposed to never see Dad again, just to make her happy? He's still our father. Their conversation continued in hushed tones, and then my bedroom door creaked open. A small, warm body burst in. "Vivian, Grandma, are you playing hide and seek with us? I found you." The voices in the living room fell into sudden silence. Seconds later, both Logan and Luna rushed in. The light flicked on and Logan froze. He stood there rooted to the floor, staring at me, his mother lying in bed, her face streaked with dried tears. His lips parted, and his voice barely above a whisper, "Mom." Luna hesitated in the doorway, her expression unreadable. The room was thick with silence. After a long moment, she cautiously stepped forward, reaching for my hand. "Mom, I'm sorry," she murmured. "We were so busy yesterday. That's why we couldn't come. Are you mad at us?" I stared at her unblinking, saying nothing. She shrank under my gaze, her voice growing smaller. "Mom, I had to work overtime. It wasn't my choice. You know this is an important time for my career. Logan quickly chimed in, Yeah, Mom, we really did have to work. But we're here now, aren't we? We came to celebrate with you today. Come on, get up and have some cake. I looked at them, really looked at them, and all I could see was Jeff. The way they lied so effortlessly, the way they twisted their words trying to placate me, just as he had once done. Had I been fighting against something impossible all along? Had all my efforts, the love, the sacrifices, the endless nights of working myself to the bone for them, meant nothing against the weight of their bloodline? Grandma, I want cake. Vivian tugged at me with her tiny hands, her impatience nearly pulling me off the bed. Logan quickly slipped my slippers onto the floor and helped me sit up. His voice was filled with forced warmth. Mom, Vivian's been so excited all day about celebrating your birthday. She kept saying how much she missed you. The moment her dance class ended, I brought her straight here. They half led, half dragged me to the dining table. On it sat a 6-inch cartoon cake, designed to look like Elsa from Frozen, Vivian's favorite. I smiled, but not because I was happy. It was because I realized what a fool I had been for over 30 years. A memory surfaced unbidden, one from so many years ago, after my fight with Jeff. The empty can of formula on the kitchen counter, the twins' desperate, gasping cries. I had fought through the pain in my bruised back, cooking oatmeal with one arm while rocking them with the other. One would finally fall asleep, only to be woken by the other's cries that I had hated Jeff so much that night. I wanted nothing more than to walk away from everything. But when I looked at my children, I couldn't bring myself to do it. So I stayed. I stayed and I fought for them. For years, I worked endlessly to provide, learning French and mastering international trade. I did everything I could to climb the corporate ladder, earning just $1,000 extra a month. I fought tooth and nail against Sammy for that manager promotion. But now, they had gone to that woman's birthday party. They had gifted her gold bracelets, expensive liquor, an entire jewelry set. While at 66, the only birthday cake I received was whatever my 5-year-old granddaughter happened to bring. Suppressing the anguish rising in my chest, I pulled out a chair and sat down. I cleared my throat and in a calm, even voice said, Sit down. I have something to say. Logan and Luna exchanged a glance before hesitantly sitting across from me. Vivian, thinking we were about to start eating, stared at the Elsa figurine on the cake, her eyes bright with anticipation. I looked directly at my children and got straight to the point. You didn't come yesterday because you were at their anniversary party, were you? Their faces instantly changed. Luna's brows furrowed. Mom, what are you trying to say? She asked cautiously. I kept my voice steady. If you wanted to attend their celebration, you could have just told me. There was no need to lie about working late and make me wait until midnight. Luna stiffened, her complexion paling. Logan lowered his head in guilt. Minutes passed in heavy silence. Then, Luna began to cry. She moved from across the table to sit beside me, gripping my hand tightly. Mom, let the past go, she pleaded through her tears. You have to stop holding on to this. Dad has connections, resources. He can help me and Logan. Why should we struggle when we could ask him for help? Mom, we've had it hard too. Can't you try to understand us? Her tears fell onto my hand, burning my skin like fire. I'm getting married next year, she continued. Lucifer and I are planning our future, and Dad promised to pull some strings to get him a job at City Hall. She looked at me then, and her next words pierced through me like a dagger. If I can't rely on Dad, am I supposed to rely on you? I stared at her, feeling as if I were seeing her for the first time. Logan had settled down young, marrying right after college. Luna, on the other hand, had gone to grad school, then thrown herself into work, always pushing herself harder and further. The more educated she became, the more successful she was, the colder she became. The more she weighed pros and cons before making every choice. She shifted uncomfortably under my gaze, avoiding my eyes. Instead, she stared at the Elsa cake and murmured, Mom, I've been holding this in for a long time. If you hadn't caused that scene at City Hall, Dad never would have divorced you. Logan, and I wouldn't have had to struggle the way we did. Dad wouldn't have ended up a low-ranking government worker until the day he retired. If you had just endured, things would have been different for all of us. Luna, stop, Logan snapped. She flinched, but then let out a bitter chuckle. Am I wrong? She shot back. If Mom hadn't insisted on leaving Dad, Chloe never would have had a chance to replace her. But Mom made her choice back then. So why is she still holding on to the resentment? She clenched her fists. Besides, Chloe and Dad only got together years after your divorce. Of course, she wasn't a homewrecker. Her face flushed, her voice rising in fervent defense. Then she turned back to me. Mom, let it go. Stop drowning in your own bitterness. You can't pass your hatred on to me and Logan. No matter what you say, Dad is still our father. I stared at her, stunned. This was not my daughter. Not the daughter I had raised. Not the child I had sacrificed everything for. My fingers trembled as I pointed to the door. Get out. Both of you. I don't have children like you. A long, suffocating silence followed. Then slowly, Luna stood up, her voice eerily calm. Mom, we should all take some time to cool off. I won't be coming back for a while. Without another word, she grabbed the cake from the table and called out to Vivian. Vivian, let's go have the cake at Auntie's place. Vivian hesitated, glancing at me before slowly sliding off her chair. She reached for Luna's hand, and hand in hand, they walked toward the door. Logan lingered behind them, standing by the doorway. Luna's impatient voice rang out. Logan, hurry up, what are you waiting for? He picked up his coat and looked at me. Mom, just calm down. I'll go talk to Luna. And then he too walked out. As the door began to close, I heard Vivian's small voice, filled with innocent confusion. Does Grandma not want us anymore? Luna's reply was sharp and deliberate. That's right, you don't have a grandma anymore. Vivian cheered, yay. That means Chloe is my real grandma now. Tomorrow, I'll ask Grandpa and Grandma Chloe to come to my school sports day. The voices faded as the door shut behind them, and I stood there staring at the closed door for what felt like an eternity. The metallic taste of blood filled my mouth. No matter how hard I tried to erase those words from my mind, the pain in my chest was crushing. But I would get used to it. I had survived worse, hadn't I? Slowly, I steadied myself, pushing off my knees to stand. I walked to the drawer, pulled out the 2 real estate contracts I had prepared for them, and tore them to shreds. If they had their father now, if they had a new mother, then I had no more reason to care. From this moment on, I no longer had a son or daughter. On Monday morning, I went to a law firm and hired an attorney to draft my will. Upon my death, all my assets would be donated to charity. I also put Logan and his wife's house, still under my name, up for sale. Since they weren't home, I used my spare key to let the real estate agent in to take photos of the property. As I stepped out of the agency, my phone rang. It was the realtor I had spoken to about the luxury villa. Miss Isabel, when would you be available to sign the contract? If you complete the purchase this month, we're offering 2 years of free property management services. I politely declined. I won't be moving forward with the purchase. The salesperson pressed for a reason, but I barely heard them. My mind had already drifted back to several years ago when Logan got married. At that time, I sold my old home, the one I had bought decades ago, for $60,000. Thanks to the good school district, I managed to sell it for $250,000. I had planned to use the money as a down payment on a house for Logan and his wife, but they weren't satisfied with just that. They wanted more. They had their eyes on my bank account too. They even wanted me to take out the mortgage in my name. To entice me, they offered to add my name to the deed and make me the primary mortgage holder. I refused, instead giving them 2 choices. 1, I pay the down payment, but you handle the mortgage yourselves and the deed is in your names. 2, I take out the mortgage in my name, but the house remains solely under my ownership. You can live in it, and I would rent elsewhere. When I pass, the property would be split equally between you two. They debated for days before ultimately choosing the second option. And Luna? She was never shortchanged either. She attended a private university where tuition alone cost $155,000 per year. After graduating, she took a 2-year gap before grad school, during which I fully supported her. Between living expenses, travel, and personal costs, I must have spent at least $100,000 on her. Even now, I still pay her rent every quarter for the apartment she rents. They drain me dry, and back then, I was foolish enough to think it was worth it. I believed that after I retired, I'd have $5,000 a month in pension, which would continue to increase. I had long-term care insurance and a fixed annuity plan that would pay out principal and interest when I turned 70, ensuring a secure future. So I never denied them anything, not once. Now, looking back, what a fool I had been. A lifetime spent working, sacrificing, and giving, only to be betrayed by the very people I had dedicated my life to that I terminated my lease on the rental apartment and bought myself a move-in ready villa. It was a cozy house with a private garden, a place where I could finally live for myself. For the first time in my life, I had peace. I even hired a housekeeper to take care of the chores. But, as it always seems to go, peace never lasts long. My phone was soon bombarded with calls from Logan. I blocked his number. Moments later, Michelle, his wife, called. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. There were still a few things left to say. The second the call connected, Logan's furious voice exploded through the speaker. "Mom, what the hell are you doing? How could you send a lawyer and a realtor to our house? Are you seriously selling our home? Have you lost your mind?" His entitled outrage made my stomach turn. He wasn't asking, he was demanding. It was as if I owed him something. "Luna always said you were difficult," he sneered. "I used to defend you, but now I see she was right. Just because we missed your birthday, you're making such a big deal out of nothing. No wonder Dad left you. If I were him, I'd choose Aunt Chloe too." Even though I had already given up on them, his words still sent a fresh wave of fury through me. I let out a cold laugh. "Perfect. Since you've chosen Aunt Chloe, let her buy you a house then. That home is legally mine and I'm selling it. So pack up and move out. Otherwise, my lawyer will be filing charges for illegal occupancy." I paused and then added, "Oh, and do pass a message to Luna. Her landlord has been asking about her next rent payment. I won't be covering it anymore." Before he could spit out another protest, I hung up. I blocked all their numbers, shut off my phone, and for the first time in my life, I let silence be my companion. That weekend, I went to a pet rescue center and adopted 2 cats. I filled my garden with flowers, vines, and shrubs. One afternoon, I sat on my balcony with a cat curled in my lap, soaking in the warm sunlight, when there was a knock at the door. My housekeeper came upstairs and said, "Ma'am, there are 2 police officers here to see you." Confused, I went downstairs. It turned out Logan and Luna had been unable to contact me for months and had reported me missing. Right in front of me, the officers called Logan to inform him that I was safe. An hour later, they arrived at my doorstep, not just Logan, not just Luna, but someone I never expected to see, my older brother Jack. After the police left, the 3 of them stood in my garden, taking in the house with wide eyes. Luna was the first to break the silence. "Mom, how much do you make as a housekeeper here?" I rolled my eyes and ignored her. It had been months since I last saw them. Logan looked unkempt, his face shadowed with stubble, his clothes wrinkled and disheveled. Luna didn't look much better, tired, tense, and visibly stressed. I sighed. "What do you want? You're not welcome here. Leave." Logan ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Mom, it's been long enough. Don't you think it's time to drop this? The lawyer actually sued me over the house, and now Michelle is threatening divorce. Just tell him to drop it." A month ago, my lawyer had informed me that Logan was refusing to leave, so I had filed a lawsuit against him. I met his gaze without hesitation. "If you move out within 3 days, I'll withdraw the lawsuit." Logan looked stunned, as if he couldn't believe I was being this ruthless. Before he could respond, Luna stepped forward, stretching out her hand expectantly. "Mom, about the $100,000 wedding gift you promised me, can you give it to me now? Lucifer and I just secured our new home and need the money for renovations." I let out a laugh, shaking my head. She had money for gold jewelry for another woman, yet still had the audacity to ask for mine. I reminded her coldly, "Your mother is Chloe. If you need help buying a home or planning a wedding, go ask her." After all, she's the one you two chose to honor, not me. I won't be giving you a single cent. Luna's face turned red with rage, her fists clenched tightly. But I stood there, unwavering, as she seethed in silence. The house, the family, everything had changed. And for the first time in years, I felt a sense of control return to me. Her voice was sharp, cruel. You think we actually want to come to you? We were giving you a chance to make amends, but clearly, you'd rather be stubborn. Fine, but don't come crawling back when you're old and alone. Don't expect us to take care of you. She scoffed. You know what? Chloe is a better mother than you ever were. She's prettier, kinder, more loving. When I get married, Dad and Chloe will be sitting in the parents' seats. As for you, come or don't, I don't care. Without waiting for a response, she stormed out. Her words should have hurt, but they didn't, not anymore. I watched her leave with indifference, brushing off imaginary dust from my sleeve as I turned to head back inside. But then, I noticed two figures still standing in my yard. Logan, still frozen in place, lost in thought, and Jack, who had been watching the whole spectacle with amusement, clearly enjoying the show. I had almost forgotten about him. Over the years, I'd long known that Jack's life hadn't been easy. My parents had spoiled him rotten. Originally, my father had pulled strings to get him a well-paying government job, but Jack was lazy, incompetent, and frequently skipped work. It wasn't long before he was fired. After that, my parents funded several small businesses for him. Some ventures made money, others failed, but he got by. Then he hit the jackpot by opening a wholesale food business that took off. But just as he started making real money, he found himself a mistress who scammed him for everything he had. His wife divorced him, walking away with half of what little he had left. Now here he was standing in my garden. When he saw me looking at him, he flashed a greasy grin. Isabel, Mom and Dad miss you. They want you to come home and visit. I narrowed my eyes. Something was off. Jack had never cared about family bonds, so why was he suddenly playing messenger? He took a step forward, his voice laced with fake warmth. Dad doesn't hold a grudge against you anymore, you know. He's just stubborn. Divorce isn't even a big deal these days. Look around. Everyone's doing it. I nearly laughed aloud. Now that he himself was divorced, he had conveniently forgotten how he once ridiculed me for leaving Jeff. I cut straight to the chase. What do you really want, Jack? If there's nothing else, get out. Jack hesitated, then sighed, rubbing his hands together in that familiar sleazy way. All right, I won't beat around the bush. Dad took a fall while out for a walk. The doctors say he might end up bedridden. Mom thinks you should come back and take care of him. You always complained that they favored me, right? Well, now's your chance to spend some quality time with them. I almost laughed from sheer disbelief. If I remember correctly, their combined retirement pensions are nearly $10,000 a month. You're telling me they can't afford a caregiver? Jack's face twisted in frustration. If we hire a nurse, then how am I supposed to survive? I'm 68 years old, Isabel. You expect me to go out and work. Even with my father immobilized, even with my mother aging and frail, the money still had to go to their precious golden son, Jack. Where was this concern when Jeff was tearing my life apart? Where were they when I was left with nothing, struggling to survive? Now, suddenly, they remembered they had a daughter? I shrugged. Their situation has nothing to do with me. I won't be coming back. Now, please leave. Jack's face darkened. Isabel, I already consulted a lawyer. Even if you've been estranged from them for years, you're still legally obligated to support them. I smiled indifferently. Then sue me. If a judge orders me to pay, I'll comply. But until then, not a single penny. I called security and had them escort him out. As expected, Jack never took legal action. He had always been too lazy to go through that kind of effort. Instead, he dumped our parents into a rundown nursing home. His only instruction to the staff, just make sure they don't die. After all, he still needed their pension checks to survive. 2 months later, I received a call from an unknown number. When I answered, the voice on the other end was faint, slurred, and familiar. Belle. I froze. It had been years since I last heard that nickname. I held the phone, unmoving, as I waited for him to speak. Your father. I don't have much time left, but there's something I need to get off my chest before I go, he wheezed, his breathing labored, his words coming in painful gasps. He said a lot more than I had ever heard him say in my entire life. But I didn't listen. Not a single word. My father had always been a domineering, chauvinistic man. To him, a woman's only purpose was to depend on a man. He had forbidden me to divorce Jeff, not wanting me to be the stain on his otherwise perfect life. When I did divorce, he was the first to crush me under his heel. Now, on his deathbed, he wanted to apologize? His words felt like a wet, frozen coat wrapped over my shoulders, not to comfort me, but to remind me of the cold I had already endured alone. I didn't need it. Before I hung up, my mother murmured the address of their nursing home. I hesitated for a long time, but in the end, I went. When I entered his room, I found him lying there, gaunt, hollow, his cheeks sunken like a dried-up corpse. It had been over 10 years since I'd last seen him. The last time had been on his 70th birthday. I had brought gifts, but like always, he had thrown them out the door. I never went back after that. Now, as I stood by his bed, his lips quivered and his breathing grew shallower. Neither of us spoke. 10 minutes later, he closed his eyes. 2 murky tears slid down his withered face. I turned and walked out. As I stepped into the hall, my mother shuffled after me, her frail hands trembling. I turned to look at her. Now 85, bent with age, I felt nothing. She had spent her entire life in submission. No matter what my father did, she never objected. Never even when he cast me out like garbage. Was she weak, or did she simply not love me enough? I wondered if my father had ever threatened to cut ties with Jack. Would she have obeyed just as blindly? I reached into my bag and pulled out a check for $10,000, pressing it into her hand. For his funeral. I won't be attending, I said, and then I turned and walked away. Behind me, her soft, broken sobs trailed into the empty corridor. I opened a large cafe bookstore, over 3,000 square feet of space. I was only 66. I couldn't just sit around eating and drinking, waiting for time to run out. During renovations, I had power outlets installed at every seat. Shelves overflowed with books, and the air was thick with the rich scent of coffee. I hired students working part-time, and people with disabilities who needed jobs. People came not just for coffee, but to work, study, and read. It wasn't a highly profitable business, but it didn't lose money either. One day, while managing the counter, I saw Michelle walk in, hand in hand with a man I didn't recognize. They looked intimate. The moment she saw me, her expression froze. She immediately let go of the man's hand, then after a brief hesitation, let out a self-deprecating laugh. Logan and I are in the middle of a divorce, she admitted. He's been involved with a woman Chloe introduced him to for a long time. I only started seeing my boyfriend after that. I nodded. I had nothing to say. Logan and Luna's lives no longer concerned me. Whatever happened to them, I wouldn't interfere. Michelle sighed, then turned to her boyfriend. Let's go somewhere else. As they walked away, I let out a quiet sigh. I could only hope that Logan wouldn't regret his choices. When Luna got married, she didn't invite me. A friend sent me a video from the wedding, along with a message. Why is Chloe sitting in the mother's seat at Luna's wedding? I replied simply, I suppose I don't deserve to be there. My friend hesitated for a long time, their typing indicator flickering on and off. In the end, they just sent a sad emoji. I won't lie. Watching that video stung, but more than sadness, I felt relief. In that moment, something inside me finally let go. Unexpectedly, my cafe bookstore became a local sensation. People flocked to experience the cozy atmosphere, and before long, it became the place to be. Concerned that business wasn't thriving, my young employees brainstormed creative ways to attract more customers. They came up with monthly themed drinks, January's Golden Fortune Latte, February's Sweetheart Mocha, and March's Coffee and Tea Fusion paired with the literary ambience. The themes worked wonders. Local travel bloggers and social media influencers began recommending the cafe, and soon, it was bustling every day. I noticed my employees were exhausted from the workload, so I raised their salaries and hired additional staff. Then Luna found out who owned the cafe after seeing a news interview about me. By the time she came looking for me, she was heavily pregnant. She walked up to the counter and ordered an iced Americano. I had the barista pour her a glass of warm water instead. She didn't protest. We sat across from each other, and she smiled faintly. But then, tears welled up in her eyes. "Mom, I think I made a mistake." I took a sip of my coffee, the familiar bitterness spreading across my tongue. Luna looked down, her eyes swollen, her complexion pale, and a large bruise covered her forehead. Her lips trembled, and then she broke down sobbing. "Mom, Lucifer cheated on me." I stiffened. Lucifer had always seemed like a mild-mannered, good-natured guy. I had assumed he was reliable, but Luna's next words shattered that assumption. "I'm 4 months pregnant, but the woman he's seeing is already about to give birth. He's been busy with work, but really, he's been living with her this entire time. Last weekend, I drove 3 hours to see him. When I got there, I caught them together. I pushed the woman and he hit me. So, Jeff hadn't been able to get Lucifer a government job after all." I asked, "Did you tell your father and Chloe?" Luna's eyes widened in shock. "What do you mean?" she whispered. "You know," I continued, "your father has connections. You should ask him to stand up for you." Luna stared at me, stunned, her tears spilling down her cheeks. "Mom, are you really abandoning me?" I stood up, my voice calm. "You were the ones who abandoned me first. I chose to let you go. This isn't a recycling center. You don't get to come and go as you please." Before leaving, I gave her one last piece of advice. "If no one is willing to save you, save yourself. Leave that man as soon as possible. I told you before, a woman can live a good life on her own. You will be fine." Time passed in the blink of an eye. The number of cats in my care grew. Most of them found abandoned at the doorstep of my cafe. The young people working for me were a good bunch. At the very least, as their boss, they treated me with warmth and respect. I didn't expect sincerity. True sincerity is rare, something that can't be forced, and that was fine. I had learned long ago that living happily in the present was enough. However, life eventually took its toll on Jeff Smith. One evening, while leaving home to pick up Chloe from the shopping mall, he suffered a stroke. The damage was severe: paralysis on one side, slurred speech, and limited mobility. Chloe, who had once seemed so devoted, stuck around for a while. She supervised his treatment and handled the finances, but medical care was expensive. Despite his pension and savings, the costs piled up quickly. Bills for treatment, therapy, and medications drained their accounts. Jeff became a burden, and Chloe, who had once stolen him from another woman, wasn't the type to sacrifice herself for a sick husband. Before long, she had had enough. She packed her bags, emptied what little was left in their joint account, and left him with one final sentence: "I didn't sign up for this." Logan, now forced to take him in, had his own problems. After his divorce from Michelle, he had jumped into a new relationship, hoping for a fresh start. But his new girlfriend had no interest in a broke, struggling man. When it became clear that Logan was drowning in debts, she cut her losses and left him. Now he was stuck with a disabled father, one he hadn't known how to care for in the first place. Life had a way of turning things around. And for Logan and Luna, the roles had shifted in ways they never expected. Logan's life unraveled further. His once comfortable lifestyle had diminished to mere survival. He could barely afford rent in a tiny apartment, and caring for Jeff had become a daily burden. Feeding him, bathing him, handling his endless medical needs. It was exhausting. Logan resented every moment of it. Before long, he turned to Luna for help, but she had already changed. She had divorced Lucifer the moment her son was born, knowing she didn't want to raise him in a broken marriage like her mother once had. Luna left the city, starting fresh somewhere new where no one knew her past. Life was hard, balancing work, motherhood, and the struggles of being a single parent was overwhelming. Yet, over time, Luna began to understand the sacrifices her mother had once made. She remembered the long nights when her mother stayed up rocking her and Logan to sleep, the cold winters when they couldn't afford a washing machine, and her mother hand-washing their clothes. She thought about the soft lullabies, the sleepless nights, and the relentless work just to give them a better future. Luna had never appreciated it before, but now she truly did. At first, Luna hesitated, unsure of what to do. Then one night, on impulse, she sent her mother a text message. "Mom, how have you been?" There was no response. Weeks later, she tried again. "I'm sorry for everything." Still silence. Luna didn't expect forgiveness, but something inside her still hoped for it. So, every few months, she sent another message. "I understand now everything you did for us. You must have been so tired. I don't expect you to answer. I just wanted you to know I think about you." But no reply ever came. Despite that, Luna sent them anyway. As for me, I read every single message, but I never replied. Some wounds, once cut too deep, could never fully heal. But that didn't mean I wished her misery. If anything, I hoped that one day she would truly stand on her own 2 feet. I hoped she would find her strength and live for herself, no longer for a man, no longer for approval, but because she deserved a good life. Time passed. My cafe bookstore thrived. My home was filled with warmth, books, and the soft purring of my cats. The people who had once weighed me down, my father, my ex-husband, my children, no longer controlled my life. There had been pain, betrayal, and loss, but I survived. And now I lived for myself. I had spent a lifetime giving, sacrificing, and enduring. Now I chose joy. No more regrets, no more burdens, just the simple pleasure of a good cup of coffee, a peaceful afternoon, and the knowledge that, after everything, I had finally learned how to be free.